It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you. Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. I'm really looking forward to talking with my guest today. Joining me is Michael Sacca. He's host of the great podcast Rocket Ship FM. I'm sorry, I can't speak today. And head of partnerships at Crew, which he's going to explain to us a little bit what Crew does. Michael, welcome to Accelerate.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, good. Well, take a minute first to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so Michael Sacca, as you said, I host Rocket Ship for the last about 2.5 years. And
a great podcast people should be listening to. I mean, whether they're an entrepreneur or not, just the way you put that together, it's very well done.
Thank you very much. And I lead partnerships and business development at Crew. Crew is we help match freelance projects with our crew of vetted designers and developers. And so the whole idea is to make freelance life a little bit easier for people who are freelance designers and developers. So we've built a bunch of systems around that, and now we're going after bigger customers, and that's kind of where I come in with our partnerships.
Excellent. So it's sort of like a curated Upwork, I guess.
Yes, so it kind of like the tier up in price from Upwork, and we curate both sides. So we vet the projects coming in, and we vet the contractors and the freelancers that are on the network.
Great. So tell us a little bit about Rocket Ship then.
Yeah, so Rocket Ship is a podcast we started about 2.5 years ago. We started it because we simply wanted to learn more. We were kind of at the beginning stages of products. And I was running an agency at the time. Matt and Joelle had just left an agency, and we really wanted to be entrepreneurs, but we just didn't know exactly what to do. So we figured we'll start a podcast and start interviewing people to learn. And that's kind of what happened. We were going to do it for like 4 months, and we were going to write a book about what we learned. And the podcast just kind of took off for us. And so we couldn't stop. And so we've been doing 2 episodes a week since 2014.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, the great thing about podcasts, and I tell people this, I mean, I started mine 6 months ago, and we go 5 days a week, and we're talking about accelerated growth strategies for companies. And I've been in business much, much longer than you have been. But I still did it from the same motivation as I wanted to keep on learning.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't ever stop engaging with the topic and your profession and trying to develop yourself. And certainly listening to podcasts is a great way to do that, but putting one on is even a better way, somewhat selfishly.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of good skills that come in, just from learning how to talk to people and learning how to interview.
Exactly.
And that really has helped with sales and becoming more comfortable on the phone, especially because with the podcast, oftentimes you're talking to people, at least we were like reaching out to people who we really admired. Mm-hmm. So we were almost scared to get on the calls, the first 20 or so, because they were people that we had looked up to for so long. But once we got over that, it really helped with talking to people that we didn't know and building a rapport and just those basic sales skills, which I didn't even realize we were building. But when I started doing sales, it was much easier than it had been before.
Wow, where was my call?
What's up?
Now I know where I stand. Okay,
my apologies.
We'll have to remedy that. So, all right. So you've been posting a really interesting series on Rocket Ship on sales for your entrepreneurial audience, and you talk about demystifying sales. So why did you feel you needed to demystify sales?
Because so many articles that we read today about, building a business, it kind of paints sales in a negative light. A lot of people just have a negative connotation about sales. It's, used car sales. It's something that, companies don't do today is the perception, although they absolutely do. But it's just not what's written about. And so we felt like we wanted to try to paint sales in an approachable light, in the light that we had experienced sales, which is really just building networking and building rapport with people and having a conversation with people. That's really all sales is telling people about what you're doing, to see if they're interested as well. And so we just wanted to kind of take a new look at it and still tactical, but approachable for entrepreneurs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that certainly technical entrepreneurs have problems with when it comes to sales is this idea, as you sort of talked about, the stereotypical, hey, we're trying to persuade someone to buy something they don't need or want. And yeah, if you had to sort of build up a consensus based on the people you spoke with, and what if you had to define sales? This may be a little bit of a leading question because I've got my own definition, but what's your definition of sales?
Well, so I mean, they're selling ice to an Eskimo, right? But for me, sales is really about that personal connection to selling your product, to literally getting your product in the hands of your customers. And I think what we've done recently is automate that, and it falls more in marketing. But I do think that sales, that point where you're talking to your customer, is the sale. And when you're finding out and solving your customer's problem, is the sale.
Yeah, I mean, I bring up because in researching my most recent book about sales called "Amp Up Your Sales," I found this great quote from Jeff Bezos about what sales is, and to me, it most perfectly captured sales. And after decades of being in it, and business to business and business to consumer, is like, this really gets it. And his quote was an interview he did in the Harvard Business Review, where he said that, we don't make money when we sell things. We make money when we help customers make purchase decisions. And I thought, that is sales, right? Helping your customer make a purchase decision. If you do anything in your interactions with a buyer or prospect that is not in support of helping them making a purchase decision, then you're wasting their time and yours.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great quote. So that's really, I think, sort of a mindset change, though, because you said this stereotype exists of salespeople, but unfortunately, it sort of exists for a reason.
Yeah, it does. It does. I mean, we've all run into the stereotypical sales. We've all been a part of a stereotypical sale where we haven't felt comfortable, where we feel like we're being pushed in to make a decision. And that's not what we talk about in the series. We approach it from more like Bezos. How do you help your customer, and how do you build a relationship? It's not just about getting getting them to buy something today now. It's really about, can you solve their problem? Do they have the same problem that you can solve? And if not, you walk away. It's okay to not make that sale if you're not the right fit for them.
And it's really a service. And I think for technical entrepreneurs that are getting into business, and this is the big barrier for them, is that they can put it in the mode of, or put their mindset in the framework of, this is a service I'm providing. Selling is a service I'm providing to this prospect to help them make this decision. It changes things for them pretty significantly. I mean, in my past life, when I was managing large sales teams, and often I made sort of a practice of bringing people from the engineering side of the house into sales because they had the product expertise that the customers really needed, is they're always reluctant. But when you start saying, okay, well, yeah, but this is really a service provider. You're not trying to persuade or convince them to do something they don't want to do. You're providing a service to help them make this decision. Then suddenly the light bulb goes on. And I think for technical entrepreneurs, I think that's really a key thought they need to keep in mind.
Yeah, and not to avoid it. I think a lot of entrepreneurs avoid the sales process because we have so much automation, and because we have so much data that we're tracking, and we are focused on moving people automatically through a funnel, that oftentimes the actual human touch, which is what could be the difference between converting a customer and having them slip away, is something that we avoid. We try to figure out, can we change the button color? Can we, change our onboarding flow? Can we give them more education? Can we build a drip email campaign that gets them to sign up? But what we don't do is pick up the phone and call them, or set up a meeting to go see them in person, which could be the difference between making the sale and not. And it could be the difference between growth and failure in a young business.
But there seems to be this push along that lines to continually increase the level of automation in sales. I mean, I was looking at a website last night, actually for another guest I'm going to interview later today, that was all about almost completely automating the sales process. And it seems like there's real dangers for that for a company when you think about it. If you said if you want to avoid that human to human touch, and you want to automate your entire sales process, then if you're not providing any value through how you sell the product, you're just a commodity.
Right. Yep. But I also think I think there's something strange about wanting to avoid people, and that to me is that might be a red flag in maybe this isn't the right path. If our whole goal is for businesses to avoid people but yet build services for people, how do we know when we're actually solving the problem that people face every day?
Oh, exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people know. I mean, it's interesting though, because I remember a time back that was about 8-9 years ago. We were raising money at the company I was with, and we raised a fair amount of money, but there's some VCs in the Valley that we just couldn't speak to because they said, look, we're not going to invest in any company that requires a sales team.
Yeah.
And it's funny how that sort of changed given the advent of SaaS and how big that is. But that was really important. I think there's still some people, investors at this time even in the Valley, that still hold on to that why can't we do this better? Salespeople just sort of a necessary inconvenience at this point in time. And if we could engineer them out of the process, we'd be much better off.
But I think we before the sales series, we did a series on funding, and what we found was we were interviewing people kind of on the changing attitude of venture capital, and so I think that attitude was very prevalent for probably the last 5 years to a decade. But what we're seeing now is that people are focused on revenue, and so when they focus on revenue, sales is suddenly back in the equation.
Yeah.
Because especially for a B2B business, it is hard to hit revenue numbers that are significant enough to raise venture capital if you don't have a sales team that's able to bring your product into large organizations and enterprise organizations. Automation simply doesn't work for those use cases.
And yet still, you're seeing certainly in the front end of the top of the funnel, the SDR function, the sales development function, that increasing amounts of automation going in there. And that's sort of interesting because there's this debate now about, well, how do SDRs continue to add value, or not continue, how do they add value at all into this process? And, couldn't they all just be replaced by really effective inbound marketing?
Right. I don't know. I mean, I think it's still out there, right? It's still out there to be seen. I know at Crew, we are still very manual. We obviously use tools to help speed up like finding emails and some of the manual search, but everything else is still very, very high touch. And because we have very specific people that we need to hit, and it's hard to automate that. I've tried to use services that build leads for you, and
right,
but they're not good enough. And they don't know what the company looks like. They only know the stats that it's given, how many employees they have or what is the role of this person. But it's hard for them to know what work that person has done and who that person is outside of just being, a creative director at a large agency.
So how's your sales force structured at Crew?
So I have a guy who he's in Montreal, and he does all of our kind of top of the funnel lead generation. And so he basically is emailing our targets and trying to open up the doors. And then I have myself and the other salespeople are actually the ones that take all the meetings. So he sets up the meetings for the sales team, and then we try to do in-house meetings every 2 to 3 months in like New York and San Francisco in our big cities. And then the rest we do obviously over the phone. But even when we have a phone meeting, we try to go see them in person, within a couple months. That's always our goal for this, because we found that the phone is great, but once we get in person, it changes the relationship. And like I've walked into offices where we had long phone meetings. They were like, yes, it sounds great. They didn't convert right to a customer, but it sounded like we were well on our way. When I walked into the in-person meeting, they barely remembered who I was and what he did, because they take so many phone calls that we just kind of became a wash. And
Exactly.
maybe that talks to my sales skills.
No, I think it just speaks to the environment. I mean, that's the thing that I think people are really not as mindful about as they should, is that customers are being deluged with undifferentiated messaging coming from lots and lots of vendors.
Absolutely.
And in any one space, just given the amount of competition there is, at the end of the day, unless you've somehow distinctly differentiated yourself, they've just conflated what you do with what everybody else does. And so you all look alike.
Right. So once we walked into the office, we sat down for an hour. We talked about, we basically started from the beginning, and the next day they were active, and they've been one of our best partners since. And it's all to the power of getting off of our butt and, going and seeing them in person and making that effort and standing out in their mind now, because now they have a face to the name, not just a Skype call.
Which, as I said, is a huge differentiator. And it really came from how you sold, right? You made that decision to go visit them, where many companies wouldn't.
Right.
And given you made obviously a calculation based on what you presumes are the lifetime value of that customer could be, that it made sense in terms of your cost of acquisition to go make that call.
Right. Right. And that's, and we've built it into our whole process. So, we have, our goal is to get in person with our big partners every 2 to 3 months, and especially a couple months after having that initial conversation with them, because we found that the relationship is just completely different. It's not anything that we could automate. We need a body to go, and a smiling face to go in and talk to them, build that relationship.
Well, it's based on emotions.
Yeah.
So, it's a great saying. People make emotional decisions for logical reasons.
Right.
and what it speaks to is that when researchers do brain scans of people making decisions, is they find that the emotional side is activated first. So fundamentally, your prospects, your buyers are making emotional decisions to buy from you that they backfill with the logic. There's a great study that somebody wrote about last week or the week before. I forget exactly when, but it was a study of the role of emotions in decision making. And there were some people that these doctors were studying this group of people who, because of a brain injury, weren't able to feel emotion, basically. And what they found is these people basically were paralyzed. They couldn't make even simple decisions like about what to eat for lunch. So you think about, we tend to think that, hey, lunch, simple day-to-day decisions, little things, we're just making rational, logical decisions. But all of our decision-making is really guided by emotions.
It's pretty telling.
Yeah. So in your case, you think about it. I mean, what was the difference when you got in front of the prospect? Well, you were able to develop this emotional connection, and they with you, that just didn't exist before.
Yep. Absolutely.
And
they remembered us after that.
And after that, it was memorable. Exactly.
From the sea of other competitors, Yeah,
we used to, I remember back a few years ago, back when I was working for companies, some startups that we were selling large multi-million-dollar communication systems. And, we knew, and this was really before the day of video conferencing and so on, is that we knew that we had to get in front of the prospects. And a lot of our competition just thought it was too expensive because most of the business was overseas. It was too expensive just to get up and go.
Yep.
I mean, we'd basically get up and go to Europe and serve cold call people for a week.
Right.
And, it made a huge difference.
Yep. And I actually found the easiest time to get in touch with someone is when you're in their city.
Yes.
Or when you're not. Like, because I can send long sales emails, short sales emails for 6 months, never get a response. But if I say, hey, I'm down the street, want to get a cup of coffee tomorrow, I usually will get, probably a 50% response rate as opposed to a 5% response rate on my cold emails.
Yeah. No, even more. I find.
Yeah.
I could be in Hong Kong and pick up a phone and call a customer in Hong Kong that didn't know I was going to be there, and I almost always got in.
Yep. And I don't even have to sell. I don't have to give any premise about what we're doing. I work for Crew, want to grab a coffee tomorrow. You have 15 minutes. And just the notion that, we'll be here in person, there'll be that human element, and we're just going to have a conversation, changes the game in terms of opening up doors. And so we've made that a practice to, when we travel to a city, I wait until, a couple of days before. I'll set up meetings with our known partners. And then a couple of days before, I'll start sending out coffee invitations. And that's how we usually fill up our schedule. It's
a great way to do it. For people listening, it's a great tip. I mean, what I used to do and still do on occasion is say similar thing, wait a few days before and say, hey, I'm going to be in New York City in a couple of days. Yeah, do you have time for coffee?
Yep.
People always do. I mean, it's very reliable.
Yeah, it's so simple. Yeah.
And it's so simple things. And again, it's such a differentiator at the end of the day. So, great stuff. So I was going to ask you, so what was the most surprising thing? Last sort of question on your series that people should make a point of going and listening to is, what was the most surprising thing you learned about sales?
The most surprising thing, I don't know. That's a tough one. I don't know if there was a surprising point because I felt like a lot of it was the head nods. Like, yep, it's just like it's the obvious stuff that but you don't do. And so a lot of it was kind of going back to the basics of sales and really just having a conversation with someone. So, we talked to Craig Wortman, who's a business teacher in Chicago. He's fantastic. But, we talked to him and we learned about objections and kind of stepping back. And some of the obvious stuff, when someone has an objection, your first instinct is just to answer it, right? And move on with the conversation. But, he was talking about taking a step back, learning why they have that objection, figuring out what is the emotional root of that objection, and then handling the objection once you fully understand where they're coming from. And just stuff like that they were just amazing reminders of, I'll take 8 phone calls a day and I will screw that up every time. But when I go back and I listen to that, or we have a conversation like that, I start to re-practice some of those skills. So that though it was those kind of things that really helped and have really stood out to me in the series.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think that the sort of the constant about sales is that there are certain basics that you have to pay attention to. And my first book in particular, Zero Time Selling, was just about that. Whole point is you could have any sales methodology you wanted, but if you weren't practicing these basics, then it didn't really matter what methodology you're using.
Right.
And I think that those are constants that people need to pay attention to. And as you said, a good example is how do you handle and work with an objection? I mean, I think Craig's approach is a great approach. I mean, to me, I look at objections and saying, well, this is, you want to step back because what the objection really is an unanswered question. The customer needs information about something, and we haven't provided it. And so in the absence of that information, they have this objection. So you have to step back and say, okay, what's driving that? So great point for him there. So Michael, I've got some standard questions I ask all my guests, and the first one is a hypothetical scenario. And in this scenario, you, Michael, have just been hired as the VP of sales at a company whose sales have pretty much stalled out. They sort of lost the recipe, and the CEO is really anxious. The board's really anxious for you to come in and turn things around. So what 2 things could you do your first week in the job that would have the biggest impact?
The first thing I would probably do, great question, by the way.
Thank you.
I don't know if I've ever been in this position, but is definitely talk to the existing customers. And I think figuring out why they're with you, and that value prop that they have, especially if I hadn't sold the product before, would be essential to learning how do I find new customers, and then how do I express the value proposition that my customers feel, because obviously there's probably two things wrong there. The marketing and the inbound, I assume, has stalled, which means the messaging to the public is probably off, which you can learn from interviewing your existing customers and testing out different value propositions. And your outbound is probably stalled, which means you may have either saturated the one market that you've been going after, you need to find a new vertical, or you need to find a different value proposition because the market has changed, and you need to learn why your customers are currently with you in order to obtain new ones. I think the other thing you could look at is, do your customers have, is there revenue that you could generate from your existing customers that you may be leaving on the table through new services or specialized services for them, and is that a revenue channel for you, instead of going out and spending money to acquire new customers, which is obviously more expensive.
Got it. Great answer. All right. So now some more rapid fire questions. You can give me one word answers, or you can elaborate if you wish. The first one is, when you, Michael Sacca, are out selling, you yourself are selling. So what's your most powerful sales attribute?
Smiling on the phone. As stupid as that sounds, I think if you can get people to smile on the other end, be it a video chat or on a phone call in the first minute or so, if you can get them to chuckle or giggle or something, it makes the rest of the call so much easier. There's so many times I get on the call with people that just don't want to talk to me, but if I can turn them around on that first minute, I'm good. If I can't, it's usually a difficult phone call. All
right. So what's your secret to getting them to chuckle on the first minute?
Oh, I don't. It's very personal, right? So it's trying to learn about them and figure out. So it's either research beforehand to know kind of what they're into. If not, it's just a quick trying to find something relatable. Is it like something in their city? Is it an event that they may have attended? Is it something that they like in the design community? Is it for me, there's a lot of design stuff. So is there a recent article that I can try to get their quick opinion on and make a joke about? I don't know, but it's all very personal, but it's trying to find that common ground quickly. I think a basic sales tactic, but I always try to be smiling on the phone when I do it. I do find that somehow makes a difference. Whereas if I'm bored, they're bored.
Yes.
So that's generally how I gauge how a sales call is going to go, is the first minute enjoyable conversation. Because if it's not, I'm probably in trouble.
It's a great tip. I mean, for people listening to this, is smile, have fun when you call, because that translates, it communicates itself over the connection to the person listening and talking to you. Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Now the next question. So, who's your sales role model?
Sales role model. That's tough. We've talked to Stelly Efti from Close.io a number of times, and I'm always incredibly inspired by his wisdom and his insight into the sales process. His philosophies on following up, his maybe is what's killing your startup, all the way through to a lot of the emotional stuff that he talks about with sales, and kind of getting over those initial emotional hurdles, because as salespeople we face so much rejection. That and he handles it in such an elegant way, and with a ton of energy, more energy than I certainly have. He's someone that I always go back to for inspiration when I'm looking for kind of new ideas in my sales process.
Okay, great, Stelly Efti, good. So, what's one book every salesperson should read?
So I just read The Machine by Justin Roth-Marsh,
right,
which was all about setting up your sales team. And it was his philosophy on how to set up, how to organize your sales team. And it's something that I took directly into Crew, with having kind of an administrative lead who is setting up all the meetings for the entire sales team. And so I took a lot of what he wrote about in the book into Crew. And so that has really helped me kind of formulate how to build a sales team. That might be slightly different than having each salesman or woman basically generate their own leads.
Right. Okay. Great. The Sales Machine, Justin Roth-Marsh. Good book. Last question for you then. So what music's on your playlist these days?
Oh man, I listen to a lot of records these days. Actually,
Oh, okay,
I've been trying to go back from
Back
the
to vinyl.
digital playlists. Yeah, so right now I have a Monk record on,
Yeah.
and I'll just put that on throughout the day in between calls. I just kind of drop the needle in between, and that's actually been awesome because I kind of feel like it gets me away from the screen and the digital in one particular way. So that actually has been really, really helpful and purposeful, because when I listen to a record, I listen to the whole record as opposed to a single song or maybe a long playlist by various artists. So that's just me. I'm kind of a geek with music. At Rocket Ship FM used to be known for like all of our outro music. So, but I've tried to go back and just listen to albums that I can put on and listen to in a single sitting.
So a little bit of jazz, it sounds like.
Yeah, I listen to jazz. I listen to a lot of electronic, quartet, Aphex Twin, that kind of stuff, and then I listen to a lot of indie rock. So I have a pretty eclectic collection. It just depends on what you're doing and what mood you're in.
So how many vinyl records do you own right now?
Probably close to, I don't know, 75, 100.
All right, that's a pretty good sized collection.
Yeah, not bad. We're working on it. Trying to try to buy a couple a month. So.
I know somewhere in storage I've got a couple hundred that are probably worth something. Some of them,
maybe.
Well, they date back quite a ways. I mean, some I inherited from older siblings that were living through the beginnings of the rock revolution. So,
with Discogs it's a great site for selling and buying.
What's it called?
Discogs.
All right, I'll check it out.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I'm probably more in the selling mode than the buying, but all right. Yeah. Well, Michael, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and everything that you're doing here is amazing. So
tell folks how they can find out more about Crew and Rocket Ship FM.
Yeah, so if you have a project that you want to do, go to crew.co and you can start your website, app, branding, design, whatever it would be. And then rocketship.fm you can find on rocketship.fm, the site, or go to iTunes and search Rocket Ship FM, and you could find it's about 250 of our episodes now.
Excellent. Well, great. Well, again, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And remember, friends, make it a part of your day every day to deliberately learn something new, as you did today, to help you accelerate your success. And easy way to learn something new is to make this podcast a part of your daily routine, whether you listen on your commute, in the gym, or make it part of your morning sales meeting. That way you won't miss any of my conversations with top business experts like my guest today, Michael Sacca, who shared his expertise about how to accelerate the growth of your business. So thanks for joining me. Until next time, this is Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone. Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.